Welcome to the strange and disturbing world of terror at Collinwood. But it is a day of celebration at the Great House. Yes, happy Dark Shadows versary if all goes as planned. This should be going up on June 27th, the 59th anniversary of Dark Shadows, and what better way to celebrate than with a character discussion about Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, with two of her biggest fans, the delightful Nina Ogle and Tina Marie DeLucia. However, I have some news bites for you. So I received the Paper Dolls book from Hermes Press, illustrated by Samantha Lomusio, and it is a really beautiful looking book, really cool with some great character designs in it, focused primarily on the modern day characters, but with a lot of costumes in there, so you can put them in different time period looks if they belong in those time periods. However, I was one of the early recipients of the book along with a couple other fans, and we quickly noticed that Quentin was missing from the book, and I reached out to Samantha, and it turned out this was an error. She did create a Quentin paper doll, but Hermes Press has issued the following message to customers. It says, "We have the best fans, so let's start there. It was brought to our attention that the Dark Shadows paper doll book was missing a key character, Quentin. After some sleuthing, we were able to locate him and want to make sure he gets into your books. Sometimes things happen in printing, and while we can't make magic happen, only Mandrake can do that, we can make sure everyone still gets this character for their collection. We are currently working on getting Quentin printed to be sent along with all the books, so there will be a very slight pause on shipping pre-orders while we work with our local printer. Already have your book? No worries. Once we have these printed, you'll get an additional order notification from the system, and we will be mailing them to you directly to add to your collection." So they're printing a separate Quentin page that you can insert into your book. As I was one of the early recipients of the book, I did reach out to Hermes, and they did in fact confirm that I would be getting a separate page with Quentin, so I will just be slipping that into my book. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be a page that we slip into the book. I don't know if they will ever do a reprint of the book. If they do at some point, hopefully they can get Quentin in there as part of the book, but at the very least, it'll be nice that they're trying to make up for it by sending us that page, and I do look forward to getting my Quentin to put in my paper doll book. Moving on here, Ansel Farage has announced that there will be a new Theater Fantastique Halloween special for 2025, which will star David Selby along with Elise Ashton and Douglas Eames, both of whom you heard in our recent Christopher Pennock tribute episode, so keep an eye out for that. Just make sure you put your eye back in after. Also, last but not least, don't forget to head on over to the Penny Dreadful the 13th TeePublic shop to pick up the brand new Terror at Collinwood Saturday morning cartoon shirts designed by my prodigiously talented friend Eric Marshall. Now, if you head over to YouTube and check out the video version of this episode, you can see some images of the new designs and this great photo of acclaimed screenwriter and Terror at Collinwood guest John Logan wearing his snazzy new shirt. Now, feel free to send pictures of yourself wearing your Terror at Collinwood or Penny Dreadful's Shilling Shockers shirts, and I'll show them off in the video version of the show. You can send them to terroratcollinwood@gmail.com. And yes, all of the previous designs and logos are all still readily available over at the TeePublic shop. The link is in the show notes. And also, if you're interested in other Shilling Shockers merchandise like DVDs, signed photos of Penny Dreadful that you can line your birdcage with, and things like that, you can head over to shillingshockers.com and click on over to the Etsy store. Rebecca Paiva, who's the director of Shilling Shockers, handles the Etsy store for my old horror host show. We do still have quite a bit of merchandise that we offer through the website, so if you're interested in any of that, feel free to hop on over to shillingshockers.com. And now, without further ado, let's get to the show. There's nowhere to run, there's no place to hide. This podcast is fun, but there are spoilers inside. Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Penny Dreadful, and I am very excited to be joined by my two guests returning to the podcast. Yes, they have been summoned back to the podcast. I've used the ancient incantation to bring them back. I am joined by Tina Marie DeLucia, who is a writer and has been published in science fiction, horror, and nonfiction short story collections, and has written several online articles covering topics from theater to British sci-fi television to soap operas, and has even written several analytical essays ranging everywhere from film theory to the nature of adaptations. A queer writer with a passion for comedy, gallows humor, and science fiction, Tina can sometimes be found making costumes for comic conventions. Nina Ogle was a longtime member of the Dark Shadows Festival staff and continues to serve as a volunteer at Dark Shadows events such as last year's Dark Shadows Remembrance Weekend in Burbank. She was also the co-writer of the Dark Shadows The First Year book, which was originally titled The History of Dark Shadows, and that book covered and provided detailed episode synopses for the first year of the show. And both are big fans, as am I, of our character focus today, which will be on Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. Welcome back to the show, both of you.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you for having us.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
What a pleasure it is to have you both back. And of course, for this topic, as I was saying before we started recording, I was just chit-chatting with some of our mutual friends the other day, and I mentioned I was going to have you both on to talk about Liz, and they said, those are the two perfect people to have for this episode topic. I said, I know, of course, I had you both in mind for a while for this one, so I'm so excited to talk about Elizabeth. But before we dive into that, how are things going? I know, Nina, you're going to be going to Lyndhurst, right?
Yes, I will be at Lyndhurst Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, yeah. And Tina?
I will be at Lyndhurst on Sunday, maybe Saturday evening if the universe is kind, if we can swing it.
Great. Well, for those who are listening, and if you're not aware, if you've been hiding in the caves under Widow's Hill, the Lyndhurst event is shaping up to be a big Dark Shadows event. It's happening on this July. Yeah, was it oh, cute! Oh my goodness!
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's not gonna leave me
No,
alone.
please do not apologize. This is wonderful. He wants to go to Lyndhurst too, or she. I don't know. They. So what's his name?
Leo.
Leo. Okay, Leo. Hi, Leo. So this is going to be happening in July. I think it was the 19th and 20th.
Yep.
And we have Catherine Lee Scott coming. We have Donna McKechnie, supposedly David Hennessy, Nancy Barrett, Sharon Smith Lentz, Marie Wallace. They're going to be meet and greets happening. There are going to be props from Dark Shadows or House of Dark Shadows. All kinds of really cool stuff happening at Lyndhurst. So if I'll put a link in the show notes to the tickets. There are still tickets available. I believe the Saturday afternoon meet and greet is already sold out, but there are still tickets available for the other meet and greets. So this is definitely shaping up to a can't miss event. So hopefully folks will attend. Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully I'll see you both there. But yeah, so we're here today to talk about Liz. And I know you're both huge fans of the character. I see behind you. You both have Joan Bennett framed photos in the background for the audio listeners. You can't see this, but if you can jump over to YouTube, you can see their framed Joan Bennett photos in the background. Of course, Joan Bennett, what a legend, Hollywood movie star. And when people say, "Oh, Dark Shadows started out as just a regular soap opera," I always say, "No, it didn't. Dark Shadows was always really unique from the get-go. Even in addition to the subject matter itself, this is a gothic mansion overlooking the ocean and these strange goings-on in the house. You had a movie star, a legend from Fritz Lang films." Like Scarlet Street, who, on a daytime television serial that was unheard of as the star of the show. She brought such class
to the program, and she was the only actor from the show who was nominated, and she was nominated for an Emmy. It was for Outstanding Achievement in Daytime Programming at the 20th Primetime Emmy Awards in 1968. She was nominated for an Emmy Award, yeah. So I want to hear from both of you, like, I guess, about your thoughts on Liz, and what is it about, why Elizabeth, why is she your favorite, and perhaps Joan Bennett as well. And we'll start with Nina and then Tina.
Okay, we're going to put Liz Stoddard on the psychiatric couch today.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Joan Bennett is the reason, well, Liz Stoddard is the reason I started watching Dark Shadows. I didn't really know who Joan Bennett was. I was born in 54, so I was about 12 or so when the show came on. Really did not, I had probably seen her in some old movies or whatever, but I didn't really know who she was exactly. But she was in the first episode of Dark Shadows that I saw. And it was when she was getting ready to fling herself off of Widow's Hill. And I'd had the show on. It was summer. I was sitting there on the floor, not really paying attention to it. But when that happened, when she started to fling herself off Widow's Hill, that caught my attention. And it was toward the end of the show, and I thought, wow, I mean, it moved me, It didn't take much to move me back then either. So. But that really, it resonated with, I mean, it really, I felt an emotional connection there. And so I thought, I have to watch this again tomorrow. And I did. And then I got hooked. The next thing I got hooked on was the sets. I loved that mansion and the brooding, dark, sets and everything. And that really appealed to me. And then of course later I got into all the rest of it, fell in love with Jonathan Frid Barnabas and David Selby, and went through all the normal teenage super addiction to the
Mhm.
show. But it was Liz Stoddard that I credit with getting me into it in the first place.
Mhm. Great.
Wicked.
Yeah. Tina, how about you?
Well, I came across Dark Shadows because my grandparents were trying to distract me with their large collection of VHS tapes, and they just so happened to have a couple of Dark Shadows episodes. Um, and unfortunately, it was time to hyperfixate on it. But when I did finally get to see Liz, there was just something so compelling about her. I don't know if it's just the fact that Joan Bennett is one of the most gorgeous women on the face of this earth. And, but I was just like, oh my God, she's everything. It's just like her command, her presence, that low tone of voice, the way that she would just look at certain people, and you're like, oh, she's completely in charge of things. You just kind of got that aura off of her. And then when I eventually did go back to watch from the beginning, episode one, I was just like, dang, she's compelling. This idea of this woman who's been stuck in her house for 18 years and this objectively rotting beautiful home, and she's haunting it more so than any other ghost, and it just stuck with me for the entire time. And just she's got some amazing storylines, and the prowess of Joan Bennett's acting abilities cannot be understated, because some of the things that she has to do is like, on paper, it's like, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I would be able to kind of keep it together. But she has that level of professionalism that carries throughout the show. She never kind of like winks to the audience, is like, isn't this goofy? Even if if something went wrong or a line was forgotten, she holds the line. And I think she's probably the cornerstone of the Collins family. She's kind of the cement that kind of holds them all together. And even though, as we got more into the vampires and Quentin and Gerard and Quentin as a zombie and a ghost and a werewolf all at the same time, she stayed consistent, and she stayed that kind of very central, strong figure, even as like kind of everyone became a caricature of themselves. And she's just eternally compelling. And bullet to my head right now, if you're like, name your favorite Dark Shadows character, it has always been Liz, and probably always will be Liz, just because she's just the best.
Yeah.
Objectively speaking, of course, but
I totally agree with what you said in terms of her being, especially being the cornerstone of the show. That's one of the things I was going to mention. She's in many ways, she's the anchor of Dark Shadows because she is so consistently that strong foundation for the show. And she changes in the sense that she goes from being a very tragic figure who shuts herself up in the house, like you said, like the ghost who more so than any ghost in the house, she haunts Collinwood. And once that weight is lifted, she does open up a little bit more in terms of leaving the house, etc. But she's always just the backbone of the Collins family, the strength of the Collins family. And some of the words I wrote down just to describe Liz when I was thinking of her: strength, tragedy, pain, grace, motherhood. There's so many words that come to mind when I think of her, of Joan Bennett's Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. Even though she's the star of the show, and later Jonathan Frid also became the star of the show as well, she doesn't. I almost feel like she doesn't get enough credit. When the Dark Shadows became a monster show, all the human characters kind of became the victims, but Liz was always just consistently important. She was in every present day storyline. Elizabeth is always there, you know?
Mhm.
And I think what kind of a testament to that is obviously we have 1840 PT, but at the start she's on in the first episode of the show, and she's there in the last episode of the modern times when they
Yeah.
come back from 1840. It's just her
Yep.
talking to Stokes, Julia, and Barnabas, like, oh yeah, everyone's doing this. And I find that, I'm sure it wasn't intentional. I'm sure it's because Joan was in the episode a little bit earlier and we can't have more than 5 people there, but I find that compelling as well. I find that very kind of like, it says a lot that Liz was there episode 1 and then she's there at the end of the 1960s, 1970s kind of chunk of the story, which is a
That crossed
majority of
my,
the show.
I made a note of that too. That crossed my mind as well. January 1971, the last scene in the present day when they come back from 1840. Elizabeth is there. She's the one in that scene who's there to greet them and tell them, "Oh, Roger's at the Historical Society. You're late. He's going to be giving his speech there." And Liz kind of almost bookends the present day material for sure. What about like Joan Bennett herself? Like after, like Nina, you said you had been aware to some degree, but didn't know her too well. And Tina, I don't know if you were aware of who Joan Bennett was before Dark Shadows. Did you, either of you, seek out her other work later, watch her films and things like that?
Oh
Or,
yes.
yeah, what did you think, Nina? What did you think of her?
Oh, well, I loved watching. I loved her in her movies also. And I remember I had this diary, and I meant to have it handy to show you. I mean, the thing is like this thick,
Hmm.
That's so
and
cool.
from 68 to 70. And I wrote, and I was looking through it in preparation for this yesterday, and I had so many entries where I said, I have to stay up tonight because, no VCRs. There's a Joan Bennett movie, but it doesn't start until midnight, you know. And so I would either set my alarm, or would try and stay awake,
Yeah.
I would start to watch it, and then being a teenager, or you sleep a lot, and I would have trouble staying awake. But I was so excited whenever one of her movies would come on, and I tried to catch them as much as I could. It was, like I say, difficult in those pre-VCR days,
Hmm.
but of course now I have lots of them. And then my mother was telling me about, she and my mother were 23 days apart in age, and
Oh
so,
wow.
and so my mother would say, "Oh, yes, I knew Joan Bennett. She was a great at, so she would tell me about her. And I would catch her on other things. When she was on the dating game, I announced to my mother the night before, I can't go to school tomorrow because Joan Bennett's going to be on the dating game. And she said, okay. And so I stayed home from school and watched Joan Bennett on the dating game. So that came in handy years later because Jim Pearson was looking for that date so that he could get a tape of it to show at the festival. And I happened to have it because
Oh,
I was
great.
home from school.
That's
So
great.
cool. Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
gosh.
Yeah, and
fantastic.
then I tried to catch her on everything I could, And of
Yeah.
course, I think I was in line to buy her book while they were still unboxing it at the store. So, um,
That's so cool.
Did you ever get to meet her at the festival?
no, I will go to my grave. That is one of my top 10 regrets, that I never got to meet her. breaks my heart. I can't even look at those festival programs or pictures hardly when she was there. It just breaks my heart
Mhm.
that I was not there.
Yeah,
It
no,
just
yeah.
makes me ill that I never
Oh,
got to a festival before then.
oh.
Oh,
Uh,
God.
Tina, did you seek out any of Joan's films after the
So,
fact?
well, it turns out that I had seen her beforehand because I've always been a big horror fan, and I never
Oh,
realized I watched Suspiria.
Suspiria, sure.
Yeah, when I definitely shouldn't have been. I was definitely like I was not age. That was not an age appropriate movie for me at the time I was watching it. But then, the I'm very lucky to kind of be growing up in the internet age where we had IMDb and things like that to kind of look up like, oh, what else has she been in? There's this beautiful list there just waiting for me to check it out. And then when I saw that, I went, oh, hang on a second. But kind of after watching the beginning of Dark Shadows, I was able to kind of, through the power of the internet, I started with all the Fritz Lang stuff because obviously I was, and then also as a film fan, like know him from Metropolis and
Oh,
things like
sure.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
So being like, oh wait, that guy, and they're very wildly different eras of his movie making career, of
Right. Yeah.
course.
Hmm.
And then that just sort of started a downward spiral where I was definitely watching them all legally online, wink, wink, until they would get taken down, and then I'd have to find somewhere else to
Yeah.
grab them.
They're
Um,
great films. Those like Woman in the Window and
yes.
Manhunt. It was Scarlet Street. And he was a Dark Shadows fan. Fritz Lang. Fritz Lang was when I had Don Glut on the podcast, who's legendary. He's a comics creator, writer. He wrote the adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back. He did the novelization. But huge Dark Shadows fan too. And he told the story that Fritz Lang used to go to Forrest J. Ackerman's the Acker Mansion and watch Dark Shadows, and he didn't want anybody to bother him while he was watching Dark Shadows while it was on. And he'd go to the studio. He went to the studio and he gave the cameraman some tips on how to shoot certain things and stuff like that. Yeah. That's really cool. And Suspiria, of course, Madame Blanc and Suspiria. Yeah. I wrote to Joan Bennett. I got her autograph when I was in sixth grade.
Oh,
Uh, my sixth grade teacher was an autograph collector. And one of the things he had his students do to learn how to write letters was we would write to celebrities. He had this 2-volume set called Who's Who in America and other books with addresses for agents and things like this. And you would write to them and send them a self-addressed stamped envelope with 2 index cards, and you would ask for 2 autographs, one for him and one for you. So he would
oh,
add to his collection, and you would get an autograph. So I think Joan Bennett was probably. I looked for all the Dark Shadows people. That was I was trying to find all the Dark Shadows people, and I think the only one I found in that book in those books was Joan. But I was excited when I saw that she was in there, so I wrote to Joan Bennett, to her agent. I think it was her agent, and I still have it, her autograph that I got from Joan Bennett from sixth grade. Yeah, but I
I
never
never
got to meet
believed
her.
I never believed that those addresses were real. So I just never, you know, I
Hmm.
would sometimes write letters, but then I wouldn't mail them. I thought, oh, they'll never see this. Why bother? I
yeah.
regret that to this day, but it's too late now.
Sometimes you could write to, I got Chris Pennock's autograph too later because you could write to when they were on TV shows. Like he was on, I forgot what, he was on a soap opera. I don't know if it was a Guiding Light or something, I forgot which one. And I wrote to the address of the soap opera, the NBC or ABC or whatever it was. And I got his, and I got Louis Edmonds when he was on All My Children. I wrote theirs. Like I wasn't like a huge autograph collector, but I definitely wanted some of the Dark Shadows folks that I could find. But yeah, no. Let's talk a little bit about Elizabeth and her kind of her role in the show as it progressed. In the pre-Barnabas episodes, I guess starting with the Burke and Vicky stuff, Liz, in the pre-Barnabas episodes, Liz definitely, and even in the Barnabas episodes, when the Jason McGuire stuff was happening, early on, Liz had, I think, a more prominent role, I think, in terms of the goings on in the show. The whole Burke Devlin thing was happening, but even though Burke was after the Collins family and all of that, and he had plans to take down the Collins family, he always respected Elizabeth, and I think even liked Elizabeth, honestly, despite the fact that he was, I mean, his anger was focused on Roger primarily. And I think Liz respected Burke too. I mean, she didn't want him to harm her family, obviously, and she was standing up to him. But I love the scenes with the two of them, with Burke and Liz. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I agree. I think Burke probably respected her because that was in the days too. Remember, in the 70s, women couldn't even have a credit card.
Exactly.
And she was running a business and
Hmm.
and she was able to stand up to the men.
Yes.
And I think he probably respected that.
I think it stands to her power because not only was she running this business, and even in the 1960s, you got to think like the 50s and probably the 40s, whenever Jameson died or whatever, and whenever she was married to Paul. And not only was she doing that, but while being in her house for 2 decades, which has its stigma all on its own.
Mhm.
So to be able to be successful to the point that she was, you can't help but think that Burke was like, if not admiring her, not just as like a person, but also as a business person. And
Right.
Yeah.
they're just delectable together.
Yeah.
Mitch Ryan and Joan together, I wish they had more scenes because a lot of it is just
Yeah.
the same. You stay away from my daughter. Your brother sucks.
Yeah.
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 Babe,
Yeah.
you're right, but
You're right. And her scenes with Roger and
ah,
Carolyn,
yes.
her daughter Carolyn, her brother Roger, her nephew David. I love, and that's something I love too, is just that core Collins family, no matter how crazy things got on the show, and they sure did get crazy, just that core family was just always there. They were always kind of at the heart of the show. They were solid. They were always there, but they evolved. Roger, especially Roger, David, and Carolyn changed a lot over the course of the series. But Liz was just always kind of, like I said, the backbone of that family, and held things together. I love the scenes with her and Louis Edmonds. Just great scenes. So much fun to
Probably
watch.
enjoyed acting together.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And even though Elizabeth, even though she changed and eventually left the mansion and everything, no matter how much she changed, she was always a good moral character.
hmm
No matter
yes,
what happened in the house, no matter what was happening, she always was a good person. Even if she was maybe willing sometimes to do some things that, can't think of an example right now. I mean, but she always had that core morality about her.
yeah.
I al-
Go for it.
I was gonna say I always think to the scene where it's all coming out where Burke's like, no, Roger was the one who was driving the car, and
Mhm.
it's his big moment, and he looks to Liz like, what are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna protect your brother? And she's like, no, I'm
Mhm.
not. Like she
Yeah,
clearly loves Roger as much as, I always think about the Roger, like that's just like the
yeah,
typical kind of
yeah.
the inclination of that, but she's like, nope, I'm calling the cops. Like he did it. Like there's
hmm
I always point that out. I point that out. I always think about that scene in particular because it speaks to both sides of her being kind of, yes, the Collinses are shady, but she has some sort of moral, not moral high ground, but sort of like a little bit of a moral backbone, um, more so than I think anybody else out of our Fantastic Four, if you will,
I
the
agree.
core four.
I agree. Yes. She's
She stands on business,
yes,
Liz.
and she usually chooses to do the right thing. I think there were one exception I can think of is, but I understand why she did it, is when it came out that David tried to kill his father,
Yeah.
she did not, you know,
Yeah, you can
encourage the
understand that.
police to proceed down that road. So I mean, and I get why. But and then when she thought she killed Paul, I mean, she punished herself. She put herself in prison,
Right.
when
Oh
she
yeah.
thought she killed her husband, even though he was a scumbag. Although later on we find out, things have changed. He also changes later on. I mean, we see Paul has kind of,
Yeah, he's Dennis Patrick now.
he's Dennis Patrick. He's
How'd
turned
that
into this.
happen?
There's an interesting kind of role reversal that happens later on there too, because of the Leviathan influence on Liz, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, so we have this story, and then Carolyn, as well. Carolyn's definitely kind of a wild child, just spoiled in the beginning, and Liz it's I think has her hands full, but she loves her daughter. She loves her brother too, even though her brother's also a handful. Her nephew too. They're all like really troubled, damaged people, but Liz kind of holds the family together. And I really love that about her character.
I think about all the situations she gets herself into because of the love of her family. Like
Mhm.
when Laura's going to take away David in those early episodes, she's
Yeah,
like, "Over my dead body, you're not taking him away. How
yeah,
dare you?" And that ends up in Magic Coma #1.
yes,
Um, when she catches Cassandra making out with somebody else when she's supposedly married to Roger, and she's like, "Well, now I gotta tell," and that
yeah,
ends up in Magic Coma #2, 3, and 4.
yeah.
Um,
Yes, yeah,
and then at Carolyn, like time and time again, she's constantly trying to keep Carolyn safe because she obviously loves her more than anybody. I mean, Carolyn crashing her car into somebody got her out of the house for the first time in 18 years to go to the police station to
yeah,
disastrous results, to devastating results. And again,
yeah,
Joan deserved that Emmy. She should have gotten it. My God, those scenes.
yeah,
But time and time again, it's the people that she loves and the people around her that are putting her in those dangerous situations or those situations where now suddenly she's out of action. And then when she is out of action or Joan Bennett's on vacation, everything kind of falls apart.
yeah,
When the first time when Laura has her in the magic coma, like Roger and Carolyn are fighting, they don't know what to do with the business. David's obviously, all messed up, and Vicky's trying to figure things out. When she's dead,
yeah,
everything's a mess
yeah,
and things like that. And there's so clearly like this missing link, and it's just I don't want to say it's cool to see because it's like, oh God, she's going through it. Oh no, Liz, I'm
yeah,
sorry. But it's kind of states her importance not just to the family but to the town of Collinsport in general, which
yeah,
is great.
yeah. I totally agree, and I love what you said about things kind of fall apart when Liz is out of commission, which brings me to that Laura storyline because she does stand up to Laura, and that as the supernatural elements start to manifest, we start to see the family members do become more and more victims here in the show, and Liz is put into this coma, and I love that she does put Carolyn in charge of the cannery, and Carolyn has to handle that responsibility. I think that's really fascinating and really cool that she does that. And Carolyn does start to grow as a character as things go on as well. I want to talk about Vicky here because I've purposely been keeping Vicky a little bit on the back burner because I want to talk about Vicky because I know people are going, why isn't she mentioning Vicky? Of course I'm going to talk about Vicky, and I want to hear your opinions about Liz and Vicky. That's all I'm going to say. What are your thoughts on Elizabeth and Vicky? I'll start with Nina and then go to Tina.
Well, unlike most people, I never really spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not Liz was Vicky's mother.
Mhm.
Um, I was struck more by how quickly they became relatively close.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I'm thinking Liz had no women friends. And for most women, that's really important to have
Yeah.
a friend. But she couldn't really be a friend to Vicky either because she was her employer. So there was that class divide, especially in old New England, A servant is a servant, not your friend. And I was also struck sometimes by how Vicky would talk to both her and Roger. I thought, these people are your employers, and you're really getting pretty sassy with them. I would never have been like that. So I guess I just thought, I never really thought about well, I guess it occurred to me that maybe she was her daughter, but, you know, I never really focused on that a lot.
Mhm.
I just focused more on how they interacted because sometimes I thought it was kind of, I thought, wow, I would never have said that to Elizabeth if I was Vicky. I wouldn't have had the nerve.
It's
But
because she's from New York. She's from Manhattan.
but yeah, and I was thinking earlier, I thought, she could have even been um Vicky could have been the daughter of one of Elizabeth's friends. Maybe she had school chum that she was close to that had to give up a baby, and maybe she was taking this child on for, for that reason, for her friend, maybe the friend passed on or something, and maybe, but I mean, that's just all speculation. And I was looking at Art Wallace's Shadows on the Wall, and I don't think he had a clear idea of whether or not to make her Liz's daughter. And I think the writers later on just kind of dropped the whole idea.
Tina?
My take on it.
No, yeah, it's a great,
No, that's a great take.
No, it is, yeah.
So I do kind of fall under that category of I think maybe Vicky could be Liz's daughter, mainly because I trust Joan Bennett's word over anybody else's. I find it extremely compelling because there's also that side of Liz is this pinnacle of the Collins family. She was the heiress at a very young age. There's all this pressure. She's a woman in New England. It's the 1930s, 40s, 50s, whatever. So the idea that there was this, let's say, reckless moment, wink, um, and a child was produced of it, and kind of like what that means in terms of like who she is as a person. Because I can imagine that she had to be like the perfect child. If you go based off of that one scene during the Jason arc where she writes her death date in the Bible, and you look at the birth dates, there's an 8-year gap between her and Roger. So I can imagine the pressure was on her for a while, because who are you going to trust, the 16-year-old or the kid in 3rd grade, So I can imagine that part kind of compels me, and the idea of like that guilt on top of the other Paul-related guilt later on to continue to send money, and then thinking, okay, now Carolyn's of a certain age, let's try and bring her back. But even if you don't believe in that theory, the fact that yes, there's some tension in the beginning and like what she's here to do, and I'm not going to tell you how I know you and all that kind of mystery. There's this level of care that she has for Vicky that I think because she is such a caring person, that kind of very quickly comes through when Vicky is missing and they find her. When Matthew Morgan's kidnapped her, she's pacing around and she's waiting and she's frantic about it. And then when later on, when Vicky's marrying Peter Jeff, yeah, she gives her Naomi's wedding veil imported from France that's 200 something years old. You don't just give that to your employer, even if you're really employee, no matter how close you are to them. Like that's something special. She was going to let her and Burke live in the West Wing, for goodness sakes. Like there's this level of care and compassion that she has for Vicky that I think is very, very sweet. I mean, granted, there was kind of like this crazy blackmail situation, and who else are you going to turn to? But also, like, you could have told Roger. Like, she tells Vicky that I killed Paul Stoddard, this thing that she's been keeping in for 18 years. So she has this level of trust with Vicky. But I don't think she's...
Because she couldn't have trusted Roger.
No, maybe not. Maybe not. But that she gives the secret to Vicky that... is crazy that she's been keeping in for 18 years, and you gotta have some type of level of trust and care with somebody. And to Nina's point, that like, who has she have to talk to? Bill Malloy, Ned Calder, who's been a phone this whole time, till he dipped because she wouldn't marry him. Put a pin in that as well. Goodness. So I think even if you don't buy Vicky is Liz's daughter theory, that you can tell that there's still this level of love for Vicky. Yeah. That kind of goes beyond that like employee-employer situation, which I also think kind of allows Vicky to be very sassy.
Yes.
Well, she took David off everyone's hands too, so that was
yeah, true. There was certainly a maternal element there. I mean, especially as the show progresses. Liz, in any case, Liz clearly cares very much about Victoria, for sure. I mean, the story goes that, of course, in the Art Wallace Bible, it was going to be Paul Stoddard, who was the father, and not Elizabeth, who was the mother. But then I guess when Alexandra was cast, they noted the resemblance. Even Joan Bennett supposedly was up in the booth and saw Alexandra she glanced and she thought it was one of her daughters when she saw her. So, and then the writers had in mind that they were going to have her be Liz's daughter. I think Guy Haynes actually just recently posted an interview with, I think it was Ron Sproat from one of the Dark Shadows festivals, where he talked about how that was what they were going to do, but they never got to it. But of course, it never happened in the show, so it's not official. It's like we can only speculate, and everyone has different theories about it. It seems to me that it just kind of makes sense that Liz would be Vicky's mother. It's I would love to still see that tied up somehow,
But who do you think the father is?
That's a good question. I know who you think it is. You want to talk about that
as we go hot take.
As we go into the next storyline? Does anybody have anything else to say about the pre-Barnabas stuff before we move to Liz's biggest storyline in the show, I would say? All right, let's talk about when Barnabas comes into the show. Of course, there is a big storyline also happening for Elizabeth concurrently as the Barnabas storyline is going on. So let's talk about the Blackmail storyline and the Jason McGuire plot. So thoughts on this storyline and Elizabeth's involvement in this?
Well, it's kind of, I always thought, it's kind of too bad he's such a scumbag, because I could sort of see those two together.
Literally.
He was good looking. He was charming, debonair. I thought, it's too bad he's just so horrible to her. But I could almost see them, that way. But I enjoyed that. That was one of my favorite storylines, just because it's what got me into the show. And so I still love watching that storyline. But yeah, it's just, again, there she is with no one to really confide in, that she can truly trust, eventually trust Vicky. But man, what a burden to carry.
You really feel for her.
Oh, yeah.
She does such an incredible, Joan Bennett does such an incredible job playing those scenes with Dennis Patrick, and how he's just, he's chewing the scenery and enjoying every moment of it. But she's just, crushed under this guilt and this weight as he's continuing to just, turn the screws and blackmail her. And her family's just watching this happen, and she can't say anything. It's just heartbreaking. And it's just so great. And I love scenes like the one you described with her on Widow's Hill about how tragic, it's great stuff. Tina, how about you?
I love Jason McGuire. And yes,
He's great. He's great.
I think that's a testament to, number one, Dennis Patrick's kind of acting abilities, but also the fact that him and Joan worked together so freaking well that exactly, I'm like, they could have been like a power couple. It would have been toxic, but it would have been great to see. Oh my God, he should have been in more story. Imagine him with Quentin. That would have been, oh my God.
Oh my goodness, that would have been incredible.
Exploded. The amount of smirking alone, we wouldn't have been able to handle it. Oh God.
And they wouldn't have been able to keep enough alcohol in the house.
That's true. Throw Roger in there too.
My God. There wouldn't have been any booze left in the entire state of Maine. We'd have to outsource to New Hampshire. I hit the table. I'm sorry. I think this storyline, I hate to say it's a comfort storyline, because she is, again, going through it like you would not believe. But it's great. The way that they wrote it, especially back in the beginning, I feel like they layered storylines a lot better than they did kind of as we moved forward, but that's just my opinion. So we're at Laura is done with. She's just gotten out of the hospital where she has been in a coma for a not very specific amount of time. I assume at least a few days or weeks, if not, or maybe a little longer. And she comes home, and Carolyn's very excited to be like, someone's here to see you. And she's genuine. When you watch that scene and she goes into the drawing room, she's genuinely excited to see somebody. Like, oh my gosh, who's come to visit me? This is so nice. And then he turns around and it's like, oh Christ. That immediate drop. It's so Good. I could get that scene tattooed. It's amazing. And that entire storyline, just the way that she declines and the way that everyone else around her reacts, because it starts like, oh yeah, maybe he's an old flame, probably. Maybe he's like whatever. He supposedly knows Paul. This is really great. What's happening with Liz? And then just this idea of this stalwart, strong presence crumbling and not being able to talk to anybody about it. Because even if like Bill Malloy was still alive, I doubt she would have told him, but she doesn't even have somebody like that in her life to kind of bounce stuff off of. It's literally just her against the world, which it kind of always has been in a way, because she's been up in the house. It's just her and Carolyn for a while until Roger and David come. And and again, Joan Bennett plays this kind of like exhaustion and despair, but this little bit of this like spark of a fight, because Liz doesn't roll over immediately.
Yeah.
The scenes where she's fighting with Jason and it's this back and forth and they're yelling at each other and they're like this close. It's so good. And you see what makes Liz Liz, but it's the Paul thing is like this giant cinder block kind of weighing on her chest. And no matter how hard she tries to get up, she can't move it off, basically, until she tells Vicky. And even then, it's still kind of around her neck, weighing her down. And he's I feel like Jason's a great foil to Liz, because Liz comes from a place of privilege, obviously. She's this heiress, while she obviously has had her hardships as a woman in this kind of society and the town and everything. And Jason seems like he's somebody who's come from nothing, has kind of stolen his kind of glory and his successes, and is kind of weaseling and snaking his way through things. So you have someone coming from privilege with still a lot of difficulties, and someone who's coming from difficulties who's kind of stolen himself some privilege.
Yeah.
So they're almost like a yin and yang, and I think that makes that whole arc so much more like compelling and fun, because they're two opposites, but they're so similar in a kind of way, because you see Liz's motherly instincts with Carolyn and Vicky and any other fatherless or motherless child within a 30-foot radius of Collinsport, and then Jason with Willie, his actual like genuine concern for Willie, and then sometimes concern for Vicky or Carolyn. Like there's little moments of sincerity, and it's like, oh, I see what's going on here. And the lead up to the wedding, when
Oh,
she's saying goodbye to everybody before she decides she's going to kill herself, heartbreaking,
yeah.
especially because, they've been trying to figure out what Jason has on her and she will not budge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're all kind of exhausted and tired, and they're like, okay, it is what it is. She's marrying him.
Yeah.
And this kind of like how defeated she is while still trying to stay positive. Ah, like that scene she has with Carolyn, but like she waits up for her because she's out with Buzz, and it's a fight, it's an argument.
Yeah.
And you can tell neither of them want it to be an argument, but they're too stubborn to kind of like give in and tell each other what's really going on.
Yes. Yeah. It's
Destroys me.
great stuff.
Scenes with her and Buzz, with Liz and Buzz,
Yeah.
fun to watch.
Oh my God. And Buzz calls her mommy.
Yeah.
Still the most respectful of all of Carolyn's boyfriends.
True. Good point. And at least
The
he wasn't.
bars in the earth.
Yeah. And he wasn't a supernatural creature. So
This is
as far as
true.
we know. And I also love when the reveal too, when they finally go down into the locked basement, and we find out it was Liz Vicky was hearing the crying when she was here in the
Yes.
house. It was
Oh my
actually
God.
Elizabeth crying,
Oh,
and they dig up the chest, and there's nothing in it, and then we have that great flashback to the 40s, and we find out what happened in the past, and it was just, or the past, as the past, as Elizabeth would say.
Love
Um,
her accent.
I love the way she pronounced that sort of mid-Atlantic accent. It was just such a classy way of speaking. But yeah, it's just great stuff. And when Jason brings Willie into the house, and how horrified Liz is, but she just sucks it up. And yeah, I love when she's kind of does confront Jason about certain things, and yells at him, but he always has the trump card. He just knows he can play that at any time, and she can't do anything about it until she finally does and admits what happened. I was really upset when they released I'd watched the show, so the syndicated broadcast, but when MPI released the VHS tapes, when they first released them, those first several tapes that they released, they edited out or severely edited it down, that storyline to focus on the Barnabas storyline.
How
So
dare.
yeah, they
I was
did.
outraged. I actually did write to MPI over that.
Did you? Yeah, I don't
Uh,
blame.
and,
Yeah,
and then I got an answer. Well, they, said, well, we've edited the first year. And I thought, oh, took
yeah.
out the one, the main episode I wanted to buy those tapes for.
Yeah, they trimmed them. They
Oh,
trimmed it way down. Thankfully, later on, when they released the first year, the Dark Shadows, the beginning, the first year when they released those tapes, they then released uh, that story, the early Barnabas episodes with the Jason McGuire storyline
I would have
intact.
crashed out.
Yeah, they did eventually release those way later, like at the very end, but those very first VHS tapes they released in like 1989, I think it was, and 1990. It was like way edited. It was because they thought people were just wanted to see Barnabas, I guess, and we're not. I wanted all of it in there. But yeah, and thankfully they did not do that with the DVDs. I would have been very upset about that. And speaking of Barnabas, I love that too when Barnabas comes in and how Elizabeth is so delighted to meet another member of the family, and it is Barnabas. She sees when she sees how he resembles his portrait.
I think the Liz Barn, not relationship like that, but I feel like there could have been a lot more they could have done with that because here you have two people who have been stuck in the same place for an extended period of time. They don't know what the world is like. I don't know. Vicky should have taken them both to New York City. They both could have been like, "Oh my God!" at Times Square. There's a kinship to both of them of being stuck in the same place and kind of being a little on the outside of everything that they don't really go into, and it makes me even with Liz, I feel like like she didn't kill Paul. She's been in the house for 18 years. That's horrific. Are we going to talk about it? We're not. Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. I feel like there's always like kind of like respect. Barnabas is one of the few people, well, not the few people, one of the few family members who never really calls her Liz. It's always cousin Elizabeth.
Cousin Elizabeth. Yep, yep.
And I think that's very, very cute and very, very sweet. It's like he's also one of the few. She's also one of the few people where he's like David, Roger. Oh, cousin Elizabeth.
Yes, yeah. Again, there's there's a deep respect for Elizabeth from Barnabas as well. Yeah, very good point for sure.
I kind of think of them as bookends or not bookends, I don't know what term I want, but a pair because both of them have that old world
Yes.
reserve and charm and warmth,
Mhm.
but they've both built a wall around them
Yeah.
Hmm.
that's impenetrable,
Yes.
but they each have many of the same qualities, and both would defend the Collins name to the death.
Great point. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, excellent point there. So as we move on, we go into, of course, we had 1795, and then we come back, and of course, Elizabeth is there during the Adam and Eve storyline and the Dream Curse storyline. And as Tina pointed out, Cassandra, aka Angelique, uh, puts the whammy on Liz. She puts a curse on Elizabeth, and she becomes obsessed with death, with her own death. And they do a prima. Of course, the storyline they did with Jason McGuire was the house, which Art Wallace had written for television in the 50s, and he reused that. Now, this storyline for Liz is the premature burial, the Edgar Allan Poe story, which they adapt for Elizabeth here, and it's really kind of an interesting seeing Liz under this curse and fixated on death and other people's deaths, but also especially her own death as well. Any thoughts on Liz during this part of the show?
It's a very interesting part of the show for me, and I not that I hyper folks fixate on it because obviously the Jason Liz thing is probably of all Liz's storylines might be my favorite, but kind of what I said earlier is that Liz is the biggest ghost haunting the house and has been for some time because she's still there and she has to be there. She's the mistress of Collinwood, and that is her curse more than anything else. So the idea that she's become obsessed with her own death, but at the same time she's like, "You're gonna think I'm dead, and I'm not dead." And I'm like, that's already kind of come true. And I don't know if I'm going to explain this properly, but like she's anticipating this end, this stagnation where she's already kind of been stagnant. So I find that kind of little, ooh, there's a little something spicy going on there. But I think what happens is the fact that you have this kind of very strong, this cornerstone, this pillar of the Collins family suddenly cracked and fallen over. It's like the way that everybody else reacts around her, I think, is also very, very interesting because they're all like kind of taken aback because it's Liz. It's Liz. Why she wouldn't be acting like this? Liz is always yada yada yada. She's always the strong one. She's the one that we rely on. So the fact that she's now kind of on the back foot and she's dealing with this curse and no one knows how to help her, I think kind of speaks to a broader sense of, kind of her role in the family where everyone relies on Liz. And when Liz tries to rely on other people, granted, not everyone gets cursed by a witch to think of only death at all the time, but there's no the same type of support isn't not that it isn't offered because they don't care, it's that they just don't know how to offer it, I feel, because it's always her taking care of other people. And again, yes, go ahead.
Well, and then Roger smashes her mausoleum, which didn't help.
Yes,
No,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's not even there when she dies. Like, what was that phone call like when he's in England, France, wherever the hell, Canada? I don't know where he is. Like, I can imagine, Liz is dead. That's illegal. She can't do that. Like, it's a joke, but it's true. Like, I don't think they could I don't think the Collins family knows how to handle not having Elizabeth. And you kind of see it when she dies. Stuff goes downhill super quickly.
Right.
Not just because we've got dream cursey werewolf nonsense going on, but that's part of it, of course. But like everybody kind of falls apart and everyone's very curt and short, and it's kind of reinstates Elizabeth's importance, but it's also like it's horrific to think about that you're buried alive. You told people it was going to happen and no one can save you. But the thing that does get her out of it is her love for Carolyn because Carolyn's in trouble.
Yes, because it leads into the werewolf story.
It leads in all that werewolf nonsense. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so good. We're not going to talk about it, are we? We're just going to move on. Why did they bury her in a nightgown?
Yeah, and they just, yeah, she's attacked. Carolyn's attacked by the werewolf in the mausoleum, and that's what awakens Liz. But the dream she has before she falls into this death-like state is, I found, genuinely terrifying when I first saw that, and I still do. It gives me the creeps. That dream where it's her own funeral and the whole family's at her funeral. It's really creepy. I find it very unsettling.
Well, and then when I think it was I'm blanking. Roger Davis character finds her in the graveyard and carries her back to Collinwood.
Jeff Clark, yeah.
Jeff Clark and
Jeff Peter, yes.
Peter Bradford / Jeff Clark.
And they think that she's dead, and then she revives, and yet they still don't believe her. It's how much more evidence that she, this really is happening to her, and they just try to talk her out of it. It's just, they just don't help her at all.
The Collins family, they're the masters of denial. Like,
that's a family motto. Deny everything.
Deny everything. Stick your head in the sand. It's
denial is a river.
They're ghosts and vampires and werewolves and witches. And nope. So yeah. But it's an interesting thing. And again, she's such a strong character, the rock of the show. So to see her in that situation is it's troubling, and it's great when she does come out of it because of her love for Carolyn that revives her and brings her back. Vicki has left the show at this point, and then we have Maggie becomes the governess of Collinwood, of David and Amy. Like everyone else, we do the turn of the screw storyline. Like everyone else, except for Mrs. Johnson, nobody really believes Maggie that they're ghosts and that the children are possessed by these ghosts or being influenced in an evil way by these ghosts. And then we have 1897 happens, and then we come back and we have the Leviathans storyline. And Liz, now, so I mentioned earlier, and my friend Erin, who's I mentioned before we started recording, is watching Dark Shadows. She's in the 1795 story, and she watched the Barnabas storyline, and she asked, she's like, does Paul, do they ever bring Paul Stoddard back and answer what happened? I was like, yes, they do. It won't be for a while. So, Erin, if you're listening, don't listen to this part.
Turn it off quickly.
Big spoilers.
Pay no attention.
Yeah. Paul Stoddard does come back, as played by Dennis Patrick with a mustache and gray hair.
His natural hair.
Yes, yeah. And I love this, that they came back to this, that they circled back around 3 years later. They came and back around to Paul Stoddard, because there were so many other things that Vicki being the chief among them, that they didn't really resolve in the show, but they did bring back Paul, and I love that. And the confrontation between Liz and Paul is really cool, that they went there with that.
Hell yeah.
I wish we could have gotten more of that, because shortly thereafter, Elizabeth falls under the sway of the Leviathans, and she becomes, she's under the control of the Leviathans. So we get kind of a not really Liz kind of, she's not fully Elizabeth there after that. And then they reverse the roles where Paul is kind of being in the victim role here, and Elizabeth is the villain. Yeah.
Good.
It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting that Elizabeth is kind of in a villainous role because she's under the control of the Leviathans, and Paul is the victim in this situation. So I don't know, any thoughts on Liz's participation here in this storyline, Nina or Tina?
I'll let Tina go ahead because it's been a long time since I've seen her.
I fall under two categories, because on one hand, God, she's so hot and evil. Oh God, she's so hot and evil. It's so good. I love that Joan Bennett's kind of like, yes, we're pulling out all the femme fatale stuff right now, and I'm like, yes, queen, you go. Leviathans can win. I'm having a good time. No, they shouldn't. But then on the other hand, I'm like, oh my God, I need her to beat Paul's ass so bad right now. I wish she killed him. I like to pretend that maybe Jeb taking out Paul was like a gift for the mother-in-law. There you go. There you go, mommy dearest. Oh God, but you're right. That confrontation scene. First of all, Carolyn, how dare you? Your mother loves you and raised you, and you're gonna let your deadbeat dad just waltz back into your life like, oh, it's my father. I'm so happy. I'm like, did you miss the part where like your mom stayed in a house for 18 years because she bonked him too hard on the head?
And that he was gonna take all your money
and like did not care about you in the slightest.
Yeah.
But when
she also accidentally gave you to the
yes,
the evil antediluvian race of eldritch horrors,
the worst Faustian deal, a worse Faustian deal than the Faust deal. That like somehow, like, I don't know what you're doing, Paul, but like you suck. I do like to make a note that there is a line that Jason says, and there's no way they could have known, where he's like, oh, well, your father and I were very much alike. And it's just very ironic that they brought back Dennis Patrick as Paul. They couldn't have known. There's no way. But I find it very hilarious.
That's great.
But that scene where she confronts him is so good. I wish it had gone further, obviously, because there's got to be some sort of, not just like the rage that she has, because it's so obviously rage, but there's also like that tinge of like that pain and betrayal, because again, Carolyn, this daughter that she loves more than anything, that literally brought her back from the dead not dead, is seeing the man who probably tormented her and was a terrible, terrible husband, let alone a terrible father for however long they were married, like everything's okay. So to see that person who's caused all this strife just waltz back in and be like, oh, well, Carolyn loves me, so what are you gonna do about it? I would have gone crazy. I'd be in jail.
I found that unbelievable, kind of that whole, because I mean, that was my personal story. I never met my father, and believe me, if he'd have come back, I don't think I would have been that warm at that age, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Like I know, Carolyn, I know you have daddy issues. I understand. I do too. Not like that, though.
Yeah, it needed more. Then it needed more
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 resistance or
resistance and
something.
build up over time. She accepted him too readily. But
Oh,
I
she
do.
should have shot him.
I would have liked to have seen definitely seen a Liz slapping Paul Stoddard moment too, for sure. Uh,
It's
Or
so nice
walling
because
him up in the West Wing.
yeah, although he does seem there's some degree of repentance on his part, but I would have liked to have seen more development in that regard. Um,
we're
given what he did, but it is an interesting when she becomes evil under the falls under the sway of the Leviathans. It is a really interesting dynamic that takes place there, I think, with her, and it is great to see her in that. And I love the scene with where that does have David brings her into the fold, as I recall, and there's the weird carnival dream where you have the animatronic clowns
Yes.
and stuff, which is so trippy and weird. And he tells the little rhyme about fat and skinny had a race all around the steeplechase, and says this whole little rhyme, and he starts laughing maniacally, and then Liz starts laughing maniacally, and now she's a
Which is like the
Leviathan.
second time she's laughed in the show.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
first time being when Jason says, "We're gonna get married," and she just starts
Yes,
laughing
yes,
her butt off, like,
yes.
"Yeah, right." I'm like, "Damn, Liz."
It was weird seeing her in that episode, and I wonder if Joan Bennett did not enjoy doing that. Or I would be interesting to ask her, did you enjoy that particular scene or not?
Because I don't like watching it. Not that I don't like clowns, but I'm like, I am so uncomfortable right
It's
now. That might have been the
it's
point, but
it's what yeah, it is an uncomfortable scene, but it's I love it. It's kind of just a weird
And it's so out
scene.
of character for Liz.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure. And I think that's what's really
what they were
strange
going
about it.
for.
It's like what is happening? And that whole storyline is just so weird. And I mean, fans did not were not thrilled about the storyline when it first aired. I dig the Leviathans. It's definitely different, but I like it. Then go into parallel time. So we have it. This is not our Liz. It's a parallel universe version of Elizabeth. Elizabeth and Roger are the poor relations now of the Collins family. They are not. Liz is not the head of Collinwood. She's not the mistress of Collinwood. It's now Quentin is. Even though it's not our Elizabeth, her ultimate fate in that storyline is also very disturbing. What happens to her in that storyline? But any thoughts on parallel time, Elizabeth? I know Nina, you just recently watched a lot of the
Yes,
parallel
I
time.
watched that recently, and she didn't have a huge role throughout the whole storyline. But I was looking at the fact that in 1970 they were making the movie, and also that was the year her book, The Bennett Playbill, came out.
Yeah.
So she was probably doing book promotion and that sort of thing, which is probably why she had a more limited role
Mhm.
in that. But even in this storyline too, she was still the same. um, she was the only one who was Maggie's friend. So she was
Yep.
still the good moral character. She was still the one doing the right thing. But one kind of little funny note about it, I did recently, I couldn't find it in preparation for this, but recently I read in when I was going through my old diary, she wore more casual clothes a couple of times and she had a skirt and sweater on. And I had written in my diary, I said something to the effect, wow, I just never thought I would see Elizabeth looking so casual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, no casual Fridays for Liz. That just doesn't fly with me, you know?
Yeah, I love her clothes, and that's something we didn't talk about, especially in the early episodes and in the
Oh,
Barnabas
yes.
episodes. I love Elizabeth's outfits
Me
in the
too.
show.
Me
Yeah,
too.
yeah. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, well, she's kind of like um, Violet in Downton Abbey, the grandmother. She
Yes.
best she got the best clothes,
yeah,
and Elizabeth Stoddard got the best clothes, I think, in that whole 5 years or 5.5 years or whatever. She got the best, the most beautiful outfits, just stunning.
How do you
Absolutely.
how do you feel about that yellow dress that she wears in the movie?
I love it.
I know. She looks so good in bright colors.
great.
It's not
Yes. Yeah.
fair.
I love
Yeah.
the 60s thing. And in parallel time, she had a bright green with the 60s colors.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
the paisley with the pink and the
Yeah.
green. Yes, I
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I love
Yeah.
Oh.
that stuff. And she
Oh,
looks great in it. Of course, she's got, she weighed probably 90 pounds soaking wet.
Yes.
Taking care of everything. I think she wore some of her own jewelry, they said in the show. And
yes.
that
She
one,
wore her own rings a lot and her own earrings and stuff.
And she was so down to earth too. Like the cast members and stuff would talk about her, Catherine Lee Scott and stuff. She was just like, when they would move seats around in the
yeah,
rehearsal room, she would help like move the
yeah.
chairs around and stuff. She would
Didn't play the prima donna at
not
all.
at all.
The,
No.
those are my favorite anecdotes where everyone's like, "Oh my God, it's Joan Bennett," and she's like, "Hey, you need help moving that? Like,
Yeah.
hi,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, do you want to run your like?" It's just so casual, and everyone's like starstruck, and she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get to work."
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Me too. Me too. I want to talk about the movie too in just a minute, but Tina, do you have any thoughts on parallel time version of Elizabeth?
I wish she was a little bit more different from our Liz. I mean, yes, you're right. Casual clothes. She's the poor relation. Roger. Like it's different, but at the same time, I kind of wish that, and I understand why they couldn't go crazy with the character, because we're filming a movie, and other things are going on behind the scenes, and we're trying to. This is like the filler almost, but I almost wish they went a little bit farther to kind of make her exponentially different from our Liz
Yeah.
because kind of or like changed her. Maybe she isn't Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. Maybe she's married to somebody else. I don't know. Burke
Yeah.
Devlin. Who knows?
Burke Dillon or Bill
Why not?
Malloy. I would have liked if they brought in a parallel time Bill Malloy into the storyline.
Yes,
Bring
parallel
Frank Sco-
Bill.
That
Hell,
would have been
parallel Jason. Make Jason like
Parallel-
a quiet Jason who doesn't talk to anybody except Liz.
He's a
Like,
librarian, the Collinsport
he's a social
librarian.
worker, and
Yeah,
he's
yes.
just like very like reserved unto himself, and he's
Oh.
always just like whispering over to Liz, and she's got to like tell people what he's
As long
saying.
as he still has the Irish accent.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
We can't have American Jason.
No, no.
That's ridiculous. I've heard death in parallel time is it's very messed up. Especially because like that kind of plays into how different parallel time Roger is
Oh,
because
yeah.
personally, and I know Roger is Roger and he's a little whatever, but I don't see our Roger doing what parallel time Roger
No.
did
No.
with the ease of which he did it.
No.
And that's I find that scene well, everything else parallel time Roger is doing. It's just like, oh, this is in our normal Collins family. Those little moments kind of really set them apart.
No.
I do also want to point out that Louis Edmonds, while he's he's choking her out, he's being very gentle about it and very professional, which I appreciate because some people like to shake 50 to 60-year-old women and throw them to the ground when they've already had hip issues from previous accidents. So thank you, Louis Edmonds, for knowing how to be professional, kind, and courteous. I'm being very subtle right now, aren't I?
And the thing is, but I was thinking he put her on, it looked like
Like a
just a regular
rug?
chair. And I thought, how did they do that? Because she's on the seat of just a regular seated chair, not even a sofa, where she could stretch out. And I thought, how did you didn't see the bottom half, but I was wondering how they did that scene because
Yeah.
he's choking her and she goes down and her head's on the chair seat. But I thought, how did,
They had to have like rehearsed it 5,000 times or something
Probably,
just to be
yeah.
maybe they had a
careful.
mattress under there for her or something.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, she was a frail,
Right.
She, she was this thin and she had that it wasn't the Texan. What? Oh God, the Texans when she got hit with the bayonet. Oh God, whichever movie she was in when she fell off the horse and like she had to relearn how to walk again, basically
Oh my goodness.
in the 30s.
Yeah, she was in the hospital. She was hospitalized for.
I think she was still married to Gene, whatever his last name was at the time.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
She had to relearn how to walk. I think.
Mhm.
Wow.
Movie.
As we've mentioned, the movie was being shot during this time, which is bananas that they were taping the show and filming a feature film at the same time. And of course, Elizabeth is in the film. And Liz, she doesn't have a ton to do in the film, but I really feel for Liz in the film. And I just rewatched it recently. And all of the horrors that take place in House of Dark Shadows. And Elizabeth is spared. She at least survives what takes place, but she's catatonic by the end of the film because of particularly about what happens to Carolyn. And then she walks in and sees old man Barnabas and,
I love that scream
Julius.
that does.
It's a great reaction. Like
Scream.
same.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite pictures.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Any thoughts on Liz in House of Dark Shadows?
Oh, well, again, you see that beautiful elegance. I mean, that just
Yeah.
um and the that she's a good person, and so just everything around her falling apart, and yet she holds it together and still looks beautiful every day.
Did you watch it? Did you watch it when it came out?
Did I? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. In fact, I was reading in my um I go back to my diary a lot when I want to revisit Dark Shadow stuff because I literally, it's this thick, and I wrote down the stuff that happened in the show and everything and my reactions to it. And I
Mhm.
wrote down when the movie came out. Yeah, we were on the phone, my friend and I were on the phone to the theater. When is Dark Shadows going to be out? And I called them and asked if I could buy the lobby cards or whatever. They wouldn't let me have them.
Jerks.
Yeah, but I was there. Um, I made my best friend go. She was never into Dark Shadows very much, but I forced her into, going about, I don't know how many times. I went with other friends. I went to see it numerous times, and then I went to see Night of Dark Shadows numerous times at the drive-in after it was off. But
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I went to see House of Dark Shadows, and didn't um I didn't really record my thoughts on the violence and the blood and gore. Didn't I didn't care for that part as much, but anything that was Dark Shadows, I was all for. And then, of course, with Joan in it as
Mhm.
Elizabeth, I loved it. So
Yeah.
I probably saw it, I don't know how many times back then, you know, and
That's
I've
so
seen
cool.
it many times since. So,
Mhm. Tina?
I use House of Dark Shadows as my litmus test. So when people are like, "What's the show you like?" I don't understand. Instead of showing them the show itself, I'm like, "You want to watch a movie?" And then I have to proceed to explain things throughout the movie, but I enjoy that. So it's a good time. I mean, every single time I've made people watch it, either friends, exes, they've been like, "Oh my God, poor Elizabeth, Jesus!" Like at the end of
Yes.
the film, and I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And I get a little not mad, but I have the script, as I'm sure a lot of us do. And there's so many good, not well good. There's so many Liz Roger scenes that got cut, or like lines that were cut that I find would have added a little bit more to Liz's performance, not Liz's performance, but just Liz's presence throughout the film. And in my silly little heart and self, I kind of wish it's not Roger Davis, whatever his character's name was, who goes after Barnabas. You know who deserved that kill? I think Liz deserved that kill of
Oh,
Barnabas at the end of the film.
that would have
Like,
been
because
amazing.
you killed and vampired her daughter, who then was killed again. You vamped her brother. You vamped her professor person who lives in the house for some reason. Don't worry about it. Her doctor friend, again, don't worry about it, is dead. Her assistant is dead. You bit her daughter's boyfriend, is all messed up. It's just her, the housekeeper, and David. And obviously that's very traumatizing, and that's why she's so catatonic in the film. But dang it, I know Joan Bennett was not happy with the violence in the film. Her and Jonathan Frid were not happy with it, so I know it never would have happened. She should have got Barnabas.
but he gave her that necklace.
Oh,
He did.
that's
That's true.
true. Hey,
Naomi's necklace. That's right.
family members, jewelry,
I wonder what happened to that painting of Naomi Collins too.
God, I want to know where that painting is so
Yeah.
bad. I
So
want it.
maybe Joan ended up with it. I don't know.
But
Um,
I think Liz goes through so much in that film.
yeah.
For a part that's not like a crazy part. Again, Joan Bennett acts her you know what off.
Yeah. It's
Um,
just that scene
e-
that's like heart-wrenching where she's just staring off into
yeah,
space after
even
everything.
even that scene in the like when they're having dinner and Stokes is like, "I believe Carolyn is going to be one of the living dead," and it just
Yes.
cuts to her, and she's so good at being expressive with her eyes,
Mhm.
and like the fact that they're so wide and you can tell that they're probably watering a little bit, and there's just like this horrific pain on her face,
Yeah.
but also this kind of like almost like this terror of like, what if he's right? It's so good.
Yeah.
God, she should have killed that vamp. It's Joan Bennett, this tall, this thin, going after Jonathan Frid. Just
Yep. No, she wasn't in Night of Dark Shadows, but Elizabeth does get mentioned in Night of Dark Shadows. They said that she had passed away, and that's why Quentin and Tracy come to the house to inherit the house. Although I don't see Night of Dark Shadows as a direct sequel to House of Dark Shadows. I think it exists in its own parallel time, because it just doesn't seem like a lot of what happened in House of Dark Shadows doesn't seem, other than Liz being mentioned, nothing else seems to, like, where was Carlotta in House of Dark Shadows? She was like, she wasn't around. Then, so back to the show, we go into 1995. After Parallel Time, Elizabeth wasn't there, but we find out some horrific stuff happened in the past. And then we go into the summer of 1970 storyline with the ghosts of Gerard and Daphne. And Elizabeth is part of this storyline, although she doesn't play a huge role in the storyline. She does commission Sebastian Shaw to do the horoscope, which was one of the clues of the downfall of Collinwood. Which is interesting because Liz never seemed particularly interested in astrology in the past, but it was like, okay, so she kind of does that, and then she eventually also falls under the sway of Gerard. At some point, Gerard.
She's like alone in one of the, not an attic, like one of the closed off rooms, and he's just behind her like, hello.
Yes, and then she's like kind of like under Gerard's power at that point, Gerard/Judah, as we find out later. So thoughts on Liz in the summer of 1970 storyline, which is the last present day storyline that we're going to see.
She's such a Pisces. They changed her birthday. Did you notice that?
Yes.
I like the fact that initially she's like one day off from Joan's birthday. I follow that more than her being March 1st. Again, it doesn't change the fact that she's a Pisces, but like whatever that means.
They made it February 28th first, which is, and her real birthday was the 27th.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And which it would have been really funny if Liz was a leap year baby. That would have been really cute. Technically, she's only 13. I don't know. However that works. Kind of like what you said, there's not really a lot going on for her in that storyline. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the idea of like, oh, she amongst everybody else was part of this tragedy, this collapse of Collinwood, which we kind of see. We kind of get a glimpse at with the zombies and the whatever and the time travel staircase and the everyone is here but they're not, and oh shoot, it's 1840, we gotta go.
Yeah.
Kind of what we don't see, like when we go into 1995 and Carolyn's gone crazy and Quentin, she's older and crazy, and Quentin's all messed up, and Mrs. Johnson's like a shell of her former self, and like how like everyone's gone, like just like that thing that we don't see kind of opens up the imagination in terms of like being a fan of like what happened.
Yes,
what could have happened that everybody got taken out. Aside from these, well, and Stokes too. So besides these four people of the people that we know and care about, because this is all speculation. I would think that if something went down, Liz would have either tried to go for David or tried to like got Carolyn out and then went back in to try and get Roger. Like she would have been in the thick of it. Like if it was just like a complete fall of the House of Usher type of moment, which is what they kind of allude to, I think, amongst everything else until, The Walking Dead happens in the summer of 1970. But I think that kind of unseen what could have happened, and then just kind of the fact that like this is already going to happen, this has already been decided, we can't change it, the kind of that helplessness, and the fact that she kind of not kicks it off but is a part of that kind of beginning of all that. Like there's nothing Julia and Barnabas can do, they've been dead since the beginning, they've tried to fight against it and they can't, and it's due to just very simple little things that they do, is I find very like it's remarkable in an unintentional way, I think. And then also for sillies, the fact that when they're like, oh, Carolyn's gonna sing a song, and she's like, listen, I'm her mother, she can't sing. I love her so much, she cannot hold a tune. They're like, there she is, there's my girl.
It's a nihilistic storyline. It's just so, because it's like you said, it's like a foregone conclusion that they're not going to be able to avert this catastrophe. And 1995, when you see 1995, it's absolutely shocking. It's like, what the hell happened here? This is horrifying. It's horrible. The Collinwood is in ruins. Everyone's insane.
It's the most
People are
beautiful
afraid to
set, though.
even mention the names. What's that?
I said it's the most beautiful set, though.
Oh, it's
Destroyed
amazing. Oh, it's
Collinwood is the most
incredible.
beautiful
Oh,
set in that
Cy
entire show.
Tomashoff, unbelievable. But and then summer of 1970, it's just it's dark, and there's nothing they can do about it. All of these things come to pass. But yeah, Liz doesn't. She's part of it, but she doesn't play a major role in that storyline. Any thoughts, Nina, on
Well,
that?
I loved some of those episodes were some of my favorites.
Hmm.
The the whole astrology thing. And yes, that wasn't really fitting with Liz's character, but I enjoyed her scenes so much with that, and I loved seeing her with Sebastian Shaw was sort of like seeing Elizabeth with Buzz. Here
Oh,
was
Yes.
yes, I love
Yes.
that. Yeah,
here's this guy that's so, you cannot see those two ever
yes,
same room together, and yet here she's going to him, and saying, I want you to set your price. I don't want to, and he's saying, well, I don't make a shopkeeper out of me, and she's uncomfortable with not being told I want, $500 for this or whatever. And I
yeah.
get that, but I just love those scenes. And I actually found the book that they're sitting there reading, she and Carolyn, on
Oh, cool.
astrology, because they show a close up one day
Hmm.
that you can actually read it. And I used to go to the bookstore almost every weekend looking for Dark Shadows, the Marilyn Ross novels. And I actually found that astrology book
Oh my gosh.
in
That's
back in
great.
the 70s. And of course, I bought it and I still have it.
That's so cool.
That's great. That is so cool. I love that. Yeah, I love that storyline too. Again, it's not the one that gets a lot of love, but I enjoy it a lot. And I totally agree. Great scenes with Liz and Sebastian Shaw, like two characters you would not imagine sharing scenes together, but they're great. And I have a great picture that was sent to me a few years ago. Rob Saccone, whose uncle was a cameraman on Dark Shadows, took a bunch of pictures on the set during that storyline and during 1840, and he sent me the pictures. So I posted them on my blog on the terror at collinwood.com website, and one of them is a picture of Elizabeth with Sebastian Shaw from one of those scenes. So I'll put it up in the YouTube version of this. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. And then we go into 1840, and then when we come back from
Ooh.
1840 as Tina. So separate topic. I like 1840 too. I think it kind of loses steam. Like I think it starts out really strong. I love the whole head of Judah Zachary thing. I think that's awesome. But it kind of it gets bogged down a little bit in the witch trial stuff. And
Hmm.
but I do enjoy the storyline. But I would have liked to have seen. I think I would have liked to have seen like our Quentin and Angelique, who had already experienced everything, go with Barnabas and Julia to fight Judah Zachary in the past, like as a unified force versus like Quentin the First and Angelique, as Danny Horn says, restored to factory settings. Angelique, who has not experienced any of this other stuff. So but it's cool. I mean, I enjoy it. Always enjoyed the ride with Dark Shadow. Any Dark Shadow storyline is better than no Dark Shadow storyline.
This is true.
So, and we come back from 1840, and as we talked about, we have our final scene in the present day, and Elizabeth is there as part of that scene to greet Barnabas, Julia, and Professor Stokes. Tell them that they'll chastise them for being late to the Historical Society dedication that Rogers is giving, and everyone else is there. Everyone else is alive. Everything's okay. David and Hallie and Quentin and Carolyn, they're all there waiting. So, any closing thoughts, I guess, on any of that?
Well, I'm happy that she was with the series the whole time, because I know at the
Yes.
beginning it was tough for her to adjust to that schedule.
Hmm.
Um, it was a difficult thing. She was in her late 50s, early 60s.
Hmm.
It's harder to memorize when you're at that age. And kudos to her for sticking through it. And I'm so, because Elizabeth was one of my favorite characters, and I'm so glad that she was there at the beginning and at the end.
She used to run lines with Jonathan Frid because they both had a difficult time with lines. I think it was Mary Leary was talking about that they would like running lines together because they would be stressed out about that. Tina?
It is so nice to see her come back at the end when she's like, and where were you? And like Stokes is all bashful. He's like, oh, it must have slipped our minds. Sorry, babe, I didn't mean it.
And it's unlike you, Professor Stokes.
And I'm like, how do you know what what's going on here? Hang on a second. But that's a side tangent for another day. But it's nice that we, like I was alluding to before, that we kind of, not that we started with Liz, because obviously we started with Vicky, but arguably Liz wrote for Vicky to come to Collinsport. So Liz starts this whole thing kind of going. And if you want to say that she's Vicky's mother, then she really started things.
No, you didn't say who you thought the father was, though, although we alluded to it, but you never said it.
I think it's Jason. I think it's Jason. I think Jason came before Paul in like this chicken or egg situation. Mm-hmm. I think Paul was a rebound. I think Liz went, I've been a perfectly good little heiress this entire time. Who's going to make my dad super mad? I know, this Irish guy. There we go. And oops.
That definitely adds another layer, another dynamic to all of that, to all of that whole situation with the blackmail and everything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when Jason tells Vicky, I was here during that time, and
yes, especially because he says like, oh, I've been waiting 20 years from this, when it's been explicitly said as she's been in the house for 18 years. I'm like, what were you doing here before, bestie? What do you know? You know. But that's just Tina's personal opinion. But then also the fact that she's there at the end and she's the one who draws everybody out of the house, because they're like, okay, so there's food in the refrigerator, one of my favorite lines, but nobody's here. Did we mess up? They don't know. They could have, everything they did could have been for nothing, and those time travel stairs are kaput, and they're just like the panic, and then kind of like as she always does, here comes Liz to kind of keep it all together and be like, yeah, no, they're all waiting for you. Look, you guys, where have you been? I'm just getting Roger's. Of course she's getting Roger's speech. Of course he forgot it.
I do. I know you said you didn't think it was intentional, but I do wonder if it was, because having Liz be that character who greets them does tell you everything's okay. Like anybody else,
yeah, that's true.
You maybe wouldn't have had as much of that feeling that, oh, it's Elizabeth, everything's cool now. She is one of maybe the only character, well, maybe her, Angelique too, I think, and Barnabas, and all of the licensed Dark Shadows media. I think Elizabeth is in all of it, other than Night of Dark Shadows, like the Night of Dark Shadows, although they reference her, but she's in everything, like the comics, the Gold Key comics, the Ross novels, the Big Finish. She shows up in Big Finish a couple of times.
Yes.
A lot of novels, the Lara Parker novels,
the remakes, the movies.
Oh yes, the remakes. Yeah, the 91 series, the Burton movie, the 2004 pilot, also the Dynamite comics. So I don't think she's in Curse of Dark Shadow, the new graphic novel that's coming out, but she is referenced a lot in it, but she's not in it because it's set in the present. It's set in the present day.
It's fine.
Yeah,
technically she's referenced in Return to Collinwood too, because her death funeral is what brings everybody together, and they read that letter.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. So a lot of like the licensed media, at least she's a presence usually in a lot of the licensed media.
And yet, no merch. Where's my Liz merch, MPI?
I don't think there is any Elizabeth other than the trading cards, the bubblegum cards, but that's it. I don't think she's in much else beyond the trading cards, right? There's I think there's a Judith pinup poster from those pinup posters, but yeah, for Elizabeth, there's just the trading cards.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other closing thoughts on Elizabeth, Joan Bennett, any Dark Shadows, anything else either of you want to say? Nina?
Well, I'm just grateful to Joan for creating that character and making such a memorable person out of her. I mean, here we are discussing it 50, how many years later? So I'm grateful to Joan for giving us Elizabeth.
Wonderful.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd like to, kind of reiterate those sentiments as well, because Joan kind of I honestly, and not that fabulous people have not also gone on to play Liz, but Joan kind of set that precedent of like we need someone with that caliber, that movie star caliber to play Elizabeth, and that's when you get Michelle Pfeiffer and all
Gene
those kind
Simmons,
of
yeah.
Gene Simmons, like those
Yeah.
type of folks in order to do it. But I guess in conclusion, I feel like Liz kind of is at the heart of Dark Shadows in terms of its messaging, and not just as the pillar of the family, but being that kind of like she is the Collins family. She is the elegance and the wealth and the status. She has the skeletons in the closet. She's willing to do things to keep the family name together, to keep the family together. And most importantly, she loves her family almost to a fault, to the point where like it can put her in danger, and other things can happen because of it. I personally think Dark Shadows is a story, not a love story, but a story about love. And I think Liz embodies that more than any other character in this show, because she loves her brother, she loves her daughter, she loves her nephew, she loves her weird cousin who she lets live on her property rent free, but she also loves her town and her business and like the people that get brought into kind of her circle. I make this joke that like she's that motherly instinct, like she adopts anyone.
She does.
She's
And
like
she,
Amy, for example. Like Amy, she lets in
yeah,
and she cares for her. Who shows up to her when she dies? It's
yeah.
Amy's in that dream that she has before she collapses dead, or when they think she's dead. Like that, I kind
And
of speaks to her love and her care, I think.
and she generates a certain loyalty as well. I
Yes.
mean, from people like Bill Malloy or Matthew Morgan, who goes off the deep end, but they're all like so loyal to Elizabeth. Such a great character. And who else but Joan Bennett could really have played that character? Honestly, like I know there's talk about there were other actresses that they considered for the role, but I genuinely can't picture anybody but Joan in that role.
I think Joan and Jonathan Frid sort of shared um, something. They both brought a lot of their real selves into their characters,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
and they're similar in that both of them had that old world. I'm trying to elegance. I'm
Right.
not quite sure what word I'm searching for, but that old world elegance and just the morality and the goodness. And so it was, or she's the female lead and he's the male lead, and they both bring that. And I think they both have it in their own real selves, and they both bring that into the characters.
I completely agree with you. And I will add also that she was a mom and loved being a mom. And I think, people like Catherine Lee Scott talk about how she would ask about who they were dating and they were, but in a like caring way and like a mom would kind of, and she had a kind of that maternal quality, and I think she brought that into her performance as well, in addition to the elegance and all of these other great qualities that she had that she infused the character with. So wow, great, wonderful discussion. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you both of you for taking
Thank
the
you.
time to.
No,
Oh,
thank you for asking.
oh my
I
goodness,
was
what.
so happy.
Yes, we're always
Oh,
happy to talk about Joan Elizabeth.
what a
We got
pleasure.
3 more hours. We could keep going.
Yay, yay. We'll talk about Joan's other characters now. But I do look forward to seeing you at Lyndhurst and hopefully at future Seaview Terrace events when those happen as
Have to
well.
do something for 2026
I
for
know.
the anniversary.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
oh my God. Wait. Oh my God.
that
Yeah.
has to happen. Yeah, 60th anniversary. I haven't heard anything about anything official, but it would be certainly be a shame if
We'll
nothing
have to make
happened.
it happen, maybe.
We have. If the powers that be don't, Jim Pearson, if you're listening, you got to do something.
Dang it. We'll do it ourselves.
We'll do it ourselves. We'll throw a party ourselves. Got to have a Dark Shadows celebration for the
Ca-
60th for sure.
Catherine has been pretty good about spearheading some things, so maybe she would be the next go-to if
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, for sure. Catherine she's the Dark Shadows dynamo. So I'm sure if Jim doesn't do it, Catherine will. But I suspect Jim will want to do something for this. Maybe they can join forces for that. So great. Well, thank you again, and
Thank
folks.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. And folks, thank you so much for listening or watching the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast either via YouTube or via the podcast apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Please like the YouTube video, comment so that more Dark Shadows fans can find these episodes. Share with your fellow fans as well. The best way to get the word out about the podcast and spread like the dream curse is to tell other fans about it. So please do so. And thank you.
That got me. I don't know why.
And for as long as they lived, the Dark Shadows never truly vanished, for there will always be terror at Collinwood. Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.